Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the FCC. My name is Florence de Changy. I'm a reporter for Le Monde and the French National Radio and the president of the club. And delighted to be the host of today's guest speaker, Monsieur Fabrice Fries, the newly appointed chairman of the Agence France-Presse. You may not know that the Agence France-Presse is the oldest news agency of the world, the oldest, hence the first. It was called Agence Havas from the name of its founder, Charles-Louis Havas, when it started in 1835 in Paris. And interestingly, Julius Reuter was an employee of Havas before he started his own agency back in London. And of course, that is today's largest news agency. This is just a way to say in passing that all modern journalism was born in Paris, in case you did not get it. But Havas was relaunched as Agence France-Presse at the end of World War II, and Havas continued separately as an advertising and public relations company. Agence France-Presse has a network of bureaus in more than 150 countries, including a bureau in Pyongyang, which was much talked about here when it opened 2 years ago. Agence France-Presse reports in 6 languages, including Arabic and Portuguese. Our speaker today, Fabrice Fries, started his career as a civil servant at the French Ministry of Finance and at the European Commission in Brussels. He then joined the private sector in 1995 and worked with Havas, Vivendi, and Publicis, among other big companies. He graduated from École Normale Supérieure and the École Nationale d'Administration, reaping the 2 highest degrees France can give anyone. Mr. Fries is going to share with us how AFP is responding to the multiple challenges shown up by radical changes in the media market, including the proliferation of disinformation, as well as concerted attacks on journalistic integrity. These are challenging times for media in general and for news agency all the more because they are at the very start of the news chain. So, what is the role of a global news agency in the new era we all know, an era of big tech and fake news? Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Fabrice Fries.
That's yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florence, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am proud and delighted to be speaking here today at the Foreign Correspondents Club, an institution with a great history as a defender of press freedom. We at AFP are all too aware of the threats the media face on a daily basis around the world. And I know the FCC plays an essential role in standing up for the rights of journalists. The topic of today's talk is the role of a global news agency in the era of big tech and fake news. AFP is one of the very few global news agencies. How global? We have an international network of around 200 bureaus. As you mentioned, Florence, we are present in 150 countries. We have 2,500 staff across the 5 continents. Here in Hong Kong, which is our Asia-Pacific headquarters, we have around 70 staff at our offices in Central Plaza in Wan Chai. We operate 40 hours a day, 7 days a week in 6 languages. We deliver text, photo, video, and graphics to media clients, newspapers, TV channels, and websites. We are present in all the world's hotspots, The last bureau we opened, as you said, Florence, was in Pyongyang 2 years ago. It has given us the chance to show what life is like in North Korea. Our role at AFP is to provide facts. We are not in the business of comments or editorials. We leave that to our media clients. We are in the business of facts, from short alerts to longer, more investigative analysis. We try to be as objective and neutral as possible. We bring context, explanation, and verification, and we are proud of it because we believe that facts matter. So how are big tech and fake news changing this role? Florence, you mentioned our history since our foundation in 1835. It has been one of constant adaptation to innovation and technology. Take this photograph from 1840 showing a dispatch being attached to a carrier pigeon. This was not big tech, of course, but how clever. A pigeon leaving London in the morning would reach Paris by 3 p.m., allowing the agency to dispatch British news ahead of everybody. I could have picked other examples, including the telegraph, long-distance submarine cables, or satellite telecommunications. Today, big tech for us has a name. It means social networks, search engines, and news aggregators. As such, big tech has a huge, unprecedented impact on our business. First, big tech has become a competing source for information. Traditionally, news agencies had the advantage of exclusivity. They were the first and often the sole provider of news. They also had the advantage of ubiquity. I mean by that they could do so, provide facts from everywhere, and being the first to do so. This is obviously no longer the case. Big tech has empowered each of us to be a source of news. Breaking news as a result most often stems from what is called user-generated content. When there is a terrorist attack, for example, we often learn about it through a tweet or a Facebook post. We, agencies, have adapted to this new competition. We have learned to include user-generated content into our production. When there is a terrorist attack, we send our journalists to the scene, and in parallel we try to reach out to the person who broke the news. We try to learn more, we check the information, and we ask for the right to use it in our own dispatch. But overall, let's be clear, news agencies are no longer the gatekeepers of information they used to be. On an AFP client's screen, the agency now competes with Twitter feeds, Google alerts, and personalized information feeds. One thing is for sure, there will never be a return to the quasi-monopolistic situation news agencies enjoyed in the past. Has this loss of exclusivity and ubiquity dealt a fatal blow to news agencies? No, because we retain, fortunately, one critical asset, which is reliability. A news agency's DNA is the process by which it verifies the news. Of course, a news agency is not immune to errors, and every agency has a story to tell that haunts its past. But these are the exceptions to the rule. And reliability is critical in the world of disinformation we now live in. Fake news is now so massive that an alternative media ecosystem has emerged and has transformed honest information into a luxury good. By honest, I mean sourced, contextualized, verified information. Because fake news is so destructive, and we have probably seen only the tip of the iceberg, AFP has made the fight against fake news a core component of its mission. AFP used to only report on actual facts, never on rumors. Now this is no longer sufficient. We also have an obligation to debunk and knock down false and manipulated stories, to write about the false. This is a big shift, a new mindset. Over the weekend in Paris, for example, we had a team of 25 journalists covering the Yellow Vest demonstrations, but we also had a team of 4 journalists who were not on the ground but at their desks, double-checking the rumors and fake photos and videos that were being spread on social networks, like this one, which was an old photo with for another demonstration with a guillotine, but not a yellow ribbon, but a red one. A large part of our production was, over the weekend, was not only the reporting on the events themselves, but on the fake news that surrounded the demonstrations. In other words, we have become as much news verifiers as news gatherers. All our journalists now have the basic verification techniques to work alongside our specialist teams, who use special software to debunk faked photos or videos. This shows how some simple photoshopping can make an absent Vladimir Putin the center of attention. The scale of the challenge is so huge that this is a case where big tech needs us, and there are not so many cases like this, so it is worth mentioning. For example, AFP has a fact-checking partnership with Facebook in 14 countries and 4 languages, English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese, and will soon be expanding to Arabic and the Middle East. How does this partnership work? AFP journalists have complete independence in choosing what viral content to fact-check. And I'm saying this in presence of one of our best fact-checkers in the region. If AFP rates a story false, an explanatory article by AFP appears under the post on Facebook. When a user shares the false story, the AFP fact check pops up. And anybody who shares a false story receives a fact check notification. It works like this. This is an example of a flagged story with the comment that goes with it. Also, if AFP rates a story false, Facebook downgrades it via its algorithm, and we are told it helps reduce the visibility of the post by about 80%. Repeat offenders are deregistered as news sites, which cost them ad revenue. So as you see, we strongly believe that in the world of social networks, news agencies are more, not less useful. Facts matter. Without facts, it is difficult to forge one's own opinion and to debate. Honest information becomes a rarity, a luxury good. and being positioned on the luxury goods segment is attractive. So this is very promising for AFP. We are far from being commoditized by big tech. I just mentioned one positive commercial aspect of our relationship with big tech, fact-checking, one area where they need us, at least for some time. However, there is also the financial side, which is much more problematic. Here is why. News aggregators like Google News and social media platforms like Facebook use freely and without permission a big chunk of the content produced by media and agencies to attract audience and advertising. You should know that 2/3 of the population and an even higher proportion of the younger generation today access news through Facebook or Google, although neither of those two big tech players produce content or have a newsroom, of course. 50% of those 2/3 never go beyond reading the short news headlines, so they never visit the media website from which the news is taken. In addition, big tech takes 90% of digital advertising, which means that the media's investments to strengthen their presence online are not remunerated. This means we are being robbed twice for our content and for our revenues. This explains the very tough financial situation the press is currently facing all over the world. And since our clients suffer, news agencies also suffer and announce various plans of cost-cutting and reduction of journalists on the ground. How can we fight this? You might have heard of the ongoing debate in Europe about the reform of the Digital Copyright Directive. The goal is to force Facebook and Google to share a small part of the value they extract from our content. There is a fierce lobbying fight going on. AFP is very active on that front, and we should know the result by mid-January at the latest. If we are successful, this would be a first step towards the recognition of the value of online information. Information has a cost. It should also have a price. This is not a theoretical or purely technical debate. The result of the Facebook-Google current dominance is the impoverishment of newsrooms across the world and the reduction in the number of journalists on the ground. The numbers are particularly frightening in the US, where information deserts are multiplying. What is at stake is the capacity of news agencies to continue to finance bureaus in Yemen, in Venezuela, in Afghanistan. The best way to fight disinformation remains having journalists on the ground, getting the facts firsthand, as this image of AFP journalist Nicole Sobecki with the policeman at the Westgate Mall terrorist attack in Nairobi illustrates. AFP delivers 5,000 text dispatches, 3,000 photos, 250 videos a day. It provides more than 600 hours of live video coverage a month, as its production becomes increasingly image-driven. All this costs money, and the red lights are flashing for us and all other media, so we need to find new financial models to sustain our operations. I am convinced that the future of agencies is to double down on accuracy and to continue to invest in quality journalism in the field. It is also through promoting media literacy and via outreach to education. AFP has done this in Hong Kong in developing relations with Hong Kong University, Baptist University and the South Island School. It is the best way we can fight fake news and remain a credible partner for big tech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fries. Well, the floor is now open to questions. Please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and put your question. The lady here. Thank you.
Rebecca from CNN. I was interested when you said that when you flag a story as fake, Facebook will push it down the algorithm. Why doesn't it remove it completely?
You should ask Facebook. That's the way it works. I think they always claim they are not in the business of censoring. So I think it's a constant stance they take. But reducing the visibility by 80%, it's their stat, by the way, it's not ours. This is what they say is already an achievement. And I think that with machine learning, they are going to train their algorithm to do that better and better. But they are not ready to dislodge this content from their page.
Actually, if I could just follow up on this, I think it's probably quite a daring or dangerous lie to have Facebook for AFP. Can you give us a little bit of background as to this alliance? Because we know in this region and some other places, Facebook has played a strange role actually creating events in Myanmar, for example, in Burma. Yeah. So where does that come from, this idea of allying with almost the enemy?
Okay. We are well aware of the role of Facebook and WhatsApp in many crises, and especially with the Rohingyas crisis, which is frightening. Our relation with Facebook is not an alliance. They are a client. Interestingly, Facebook is buying our content. It's probably one of the very few occasions where you could see Facebook buying content from a media. We are not. We of course asked ourselves many questions when we entered into this relationship. We believe that Facebook has a huge problem on its hand. We don't pretend that we are going to solve this problem by ourselves. We are just a small contributor to solving the problem. And we do that independently, especially because we are the ones that select the content we want to fact check. This is a very strong guarantee. And if ever we are not told what to double check, which is very important, and we apply our own editorial rules. And I believe it's our core mission today. And we do not see, we are able to fight Facebook and Google as we do when it comes to the discussion on neighboring rights in Brussels, but we don't go as far as saying that Facebook and Google are our enemies. Certainly not. Again, we believe they have a big problem. They can't solve it by themselves. We play a role. We won't solve the problem by ourselves, certainly.
Thank you. Next question, here on the left.
My name is Angus Forsyth, a member of the FCC. Are you privately owned, publicly owned, government owned? Anybody who can subject you to any pressures?
By status, we are independent. We have no equity, in fact, which is very strange, and we have no shareholders. So this is very strange, I know. When I joined, I had a hard time, and I'm still struggling to understand how that can work. But it's a fact. It's a statute that dates back to 1957. And the fact of not having shareholders was perceived, rightly I believe, as the best way to secure the journalist's independence. Saying that, let's not be hypocritical, we get a subsidy from the French state, and it is covering the running of our international network. Because if we were a national agency covering only France, we know we could be profitable. Building a network outside France costs a lot of money. For example, our Asia-Pacific operations cost us not much, a lot of money. But it's good investment, and we are very proud to be doing this, Philippe. So we get this subsidy, which is a compensation for our international costs, and this is monitored by the European Commission because it can't be perceived as a state aid, and we have annual reviews of this subsidy. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you. Next question here.
Hi, I'm Caroline, also with CNN. I wanted to follow up on the Facebook conversation. So to be clear, you get paid by Facebook for this news verification, correct?
Yes, they pay us up to, I think we can check, up to 200 contents per month. And so we have several thresholds.
Okay. So do you therefore have any concern with Facebook outsourcing its issue of fake news? And along the same lines, you mentioned a need for new funding for media. Is this a new model, a new financial model in which modern media can work with social media, big tech?
I think we're not doing it for the sake of money. We are doing this fact-checking work because we believe it's our core mission today. Yet it's providing us a few 100,000 euros. It's been the case for about 8 months, so it's promising. It's not going to change the financial situation of AFP, but it's good money to take. And by the way, what we do for Facebook, we could be doing for YouTube, for example, when it comes to videos. So we are open to other commercial relationships. Now, is Facebook outsourcing its big issue to AFP? As I said, I think we are a minor solution to their problem, which is huge. They are themselves starting to hire people. They have dozens of people that come into Facebook, same at Google, by the way, who are fact checkers themselves. So it's a new mindset, and we are only a small part of the solution. But I believe that AFP is ahead of its competitors in that field. It is true to say we are probably the strongest partner of Facebook when it comes to fact-checking. They are currently covering 30 countries with partners such as First Data and others, and we are already covering 14. So we are the biggest contributor.
Thank you. Next question. Right here.
My name is Abdul Qadir. I have a question regarding fake news and dissent. Of course, this fake news phenomena emerged after the US presidential elections. And there has been a lot of pressure on the social media platforms on controlling the spread of fake news. Of course, these media platforms are also under tremendous pressure to do something about it. But there are also governments who most of the time, of course in the authoritarian states, whatever dissent is, it's considered as fake news. So don't you think that on one hand, when there's so much pressure on the social media platform to control fake news, it is ultimately going to muzzle the dissent where there is censorship. So the only option for people to reach out to a greater audience is social media.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, can you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Abdul Qadir Mehmet.
Are you in the media?
Yes, I'm a diplomat here. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm not sure about the question.
Could you rephrase a little bit the question, please?
Yeah, so sorry, I've not been able to explain properly.
No, it's coming from here.
My question was regarding fake news and dissent, because and dissent. So once we have so much pressure on the social media to control fake news, don't you think it's going to also kill the dissent, an alternative voice in a lot of authoritarian states?
We're struggling a little bit with understanding the
manifester contre le gouvernement. Est-ce que ça va soutenir la dissidence que vous avez ici en plutôt de réseaux sociaux? Rien de facteur. C'est ça la
Oh, do you want to rephrase it, Elaine, the way you understand it? No.
Social media, people use social media to talk about political issues or whatever, but they're not allowed to in their own country because they're authoritarian states. So the work, so there's a fear that sort of that will be squashed in this whole let's get fake news under control.
Well, again, when it comes to our role, we are free to select the content we want to fact check, and it's of course not our turf to cross-check political content. We are quite aware of that, so I think it's a very different matter. Philippe, this is no.
Alex?
I just have a follow-up question on that. I think part of what you're talking about is in certain countries, particularly in this part of the world, there's cybersecurity laws or other content laws that impinge on freedom of speech and allow certain governments to basically argue that content can be deleted. So sort of a different side of this question, I guess, for you as a fact checker, for AFP as fact checking, are there any countries where the content that you guys flag as fake is not pushed down but deleted? Or are you aware of any countries where content on Facebook is actually deleted, whether or not you're involved with
I'm
flagging
not aware of it. Not aware of it. Maybe you have other experience here in the region. We have our best expert here, so no.
Could we have the mic here, please? To the expert of fact-checking in Asia of AFP.
Maybe you can.
Surprise appearance.
Okay. All right. So my name's Carl Malakunis, and I'm a fact checker here for AFP in Asia.
Maybe you can explain your daily work, because I understand it's intriguing for a lot of people here. How do we select content? In which countries? Why are those countries selected?
Look, we're very aware of the issues in terms of authoritarian regimes, but I guess also in other countries too, where not just authoritarian regimes, where people deem that it's fake news, and that's obviously coming from America and elsewhere. So we're very aware that authorities will are using this fake news as a tool to for their ends. We're not about. We're very aware of that. When we go into certain, we operate heavily in the Philippines, in Indonesia, Pakistan here, and India. So in those countries, I mean, we're not going in and picking out what the politicians say. We're not trying to debunk what a government official says. We're looking at that sort of that murky world underneath that sort of subterranean world of disinformation, and that's where you have political supporters, political groups putting things out, and when we fact check those, we are very aware of who are we fact checking, who are the groups, what are the impacts of that, and we, I guess, are very careful and very aware. But yeah, as I said, I guess maybe the question, one of the questions is, could we fact check a piece of content and then authoritarian government comes in and uses that as an excuse to crack down on that person? So yeah, that's something that we're very aware of, and if we were able to, whenever we fact check any sensitive content, that's something that is very much on our radar.
Thank you very much. Another question there.
Richard Ward, member here. Just to put a slightly different twist on this, if someone declares something to be fake news, do you bear an obligation to cite that assertion as being inaccurate?
Again, we have no obligation whatsoever. We are really free to judge on a case-by-case analysis. As simple as that. Being a fact checker doesn't mean we are no longer a journalist able to make reasonable choices. So.
Thank you. Question there from Edith.
Hi, Edith Terry, former journalist. I have to say that one of my favorite correspondents was with the AFP in Jakarta, who was a great comrade many years ago. But my question is about your international network. In today's world, basically a shrinking number of media organizations have been able to maintain any kind of international coverage. And it really is almost becoming the domain of governments and government subsidies. So, in addition to AFP, probably the largest international network is Xinhua, which has a much more, I would say, much more political mission. My question is, what are the politics of sustaining this sort of international network in France with the government? And then what are the economics of the international network? Can you expand it with the revenue base you have? Are there different alternatives in terms of gathering news, working with local media outlets, local journalists who are not on the payroll of AFP, for example? So sort of politics and economics of running an international news service. I think it's fascinating that AFP continues to do this as the oldest international news service.
Yes, as I said, it's a big challenge. It's a bit of a miracle that AFP still covers so many countries and is present in so many offices. France is a mid-sized economy, so having one of the very few global agencies, as I said, is a bit of a miracle. Without state support, this international network would not be sustainable. So state subsidies account for about 35% of our total revenues. That's a lot. We need to expand our commercial revenues to be less dependent. I was in Lebanon a month ago, and it's from Lebanon that we cover Syria, and I was told by a long-standing reporter that when he covered the region, Syria or Iraq, 10 years ago, he would have about a dozen of colleagues of medias covering different crises. Now for Syria, he told me we basically have AFP, Reuters, Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and this is it. So yes, it's a big issue, and this is why it's so important to fight for the value of information and to find new streams of revenue, and to force Google and Facebook to share a bit of the value we all together create when it comes to information gathering. Because the end result, look at a crisis like Yemen, we discussed that half an hour ago. Only strangers can cover this crisis, and we have very few resources on the ground. So this is a big challenge. And what is true for war zones is also true for a lot of regions, even in developed countries. I mentioned the information deserts in the US. Even in France, it could be argued that journalists missed a lot of the evolving situation because we were not able to cover closely enough what is going on.
Thank you. Well, we don't have much more time. We have 2 more questions there. Maybe Elaine, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Elaine Pickering. In today's world, and kind of built on some of what we've been talking about, how do you prevent fact-checking becoming surveillance? There must be organization. In days gone by, you'd have the reporter in the field, and they might be the only person there that's sending information. But there's so many people now jumping on information. You're doing your part, but how do you, as a news organization, how do you safeguard against it all becoming very murky?
What? I don't get it. What is the risk you foresee?
Surveillance, basically. Too much fact-checking becomes monitoring everything and everyone.
We are far from this level. There is so much disinformation that we are struggling to just follow the pace of disinformation. So we are not. We don't think we are participating to a surveillance society at all.
Actually, could I follow up on something you mentioned, the notion of deserts of information, including in America or in other places of the world? There seems to be, including among the leading global news agencies, a consensus on what every morning deserves to be covered, which is actually probably 10% of what actually happens in the world. Is AFP able to have its own take on the world news and what is important? How, for example, I noticed personally that Al Jazeera sometimes takes a very different take and covers stories that no one else covers. Is this something that AFP is aiming at as well, is doing?
I think when it comes to the diversity of news, first of all, there have been many surveys showing that, for example, AP, Reuters, and AFP did not cover the same event the same way. There is an AFP view on news, which is different from AP Plus, and this is one of the benefits of social media, because we criticize social media for their role in disinformation, but social media have also brought a lot of diversity in the coverage of news. new topics, new challenges. So overall, I don't think that it's an antidote to uniformization of news.
Great. What time? We almost. Well, I'm sorry, it's 2 o'clock. I will still squeeze in one last comment of you, if I may, on the very situation of Hong Kong and this club. As you know, we've lost our first vice president not long ago. He's the first journalist of Hong Kong who has been declined a work visa. What is your view and AFP view on this, if any?
I'm well aware of the case of Victor Mallet and what caused this situation. We are obviously concerned. During the handover in 1997, it was clear that freedom of press and freedom of speech were to be continued. And contrary to AP and Reuters, who moved their regional headquarters to Singapore or Bangkok, AFP decided to remain in Hong Kong. We are closely monitoring the situation, and this is clearly a matter for concern, but for the time being we are present in Hong Kong and we intend to stay here.
Well, thank you very much, Fabrice Fries, for joining us today, and please join me in a big round of applause.